Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune in to this episode. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Eric Grafstrom, who is here to talk about his work basically in stand-up startup land and his experience in helping new startups get off the ground. I don't know where the stand-up came from, but we'll maybe get to that at some point during the interview. Eric started his career at broadcast.com, which at the time was AudioNet back in the day, and he was tasked with selling webcasting to people who didn't have a sound card or speakers for their desktop computers. And once Yahoo acquired the company, Eric worked in London and then subsequently in Silicon Valley. After leaving the company, he worked with dozens of venture capitalists backed startups as an executive, fractional CXO, and coach. Eric has over 20 years of experience that have given him cause to say that truth is stranger than fiction, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. He is the founder of ExitGuide, a merger and acquisition platform for small businesses, and whose mission is to democratize M&A and enable trillions of dollars in value to transition to the next generation of small business owners. Eric, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today.
Gary, it's so good to be here, and I guess the cat's out of the bag. I'm an entrepreneur who's always wanted to be either a chef or a stand-up comedian, so you figured it out.
I love it. I love it. It's yeah, the stand-up part. We were having a bit of a laugh before we came on, so I guess that's
Yeah,
must that must be where
yeah.
it came from. That's an enjoyable start. So, I detailed a very high level of your early career. Can you talk us through your early career, including some of the memorable experiences that helped shape your future?
Sure. I was very fortunate. My foray into being an entrepreneur and working in startups was not planned. This was before Silicon Valley had really emerged into the kind of the public eye. Uh, this is back in the mid '90s. I had worked on a political campaign. I met somebody who, after the campaign was over, had joined this early stage startup in Dallas, Texas. And I walked in, and it was truly, I mean, it was a loft, a residential loft in a kind of industrial part of town. And I met the founders, and they had, and this is for anyone who's probably under the age of 40 is going to not really follow all this, but they had a 10,000 stream real audio license, and they felt like they could, leverage this technology that they were using to broadcast radio stations and whatnot to, um, broadcast events over the internet. And so, you know, I don't think I ever planned on being an entrepreneur. And the funny thing is when I look back, I had started a business in college selling t-shirts like door to door. I was making up funny t-shirts, not all of them safe for young ears, and had made a couple $1,000 and was doing that, and did one or two other things in college, but I never thought about it. But I joined this company which was trying to radically change the way that the internet was used, and instead of just being pages, it was actually broadcasting audio and later video over the internet. And I guess I caught the bug, but I never got into this thinking, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to work in startups. And I had a journalism degree, so the early stages of my career were largely the good fortune of getting around good people who were willing to give me a chance.
Yeah.
And it's something I've taken through to not only, myself and stepping into new opportunities where I've grown and stretched myself, but looking for people who have that same drive and desire, which is, sure, they didn't have all that pedigree training, or maybe they didn't set out on this storyline, but they, stepped into it. But mine is through an accidental meeting of people and getting into it. And then that just kind of took me into early stage tech startups.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was chatting. I have a mastermind here in Calgary with a couple of good friends, and we were talking at one of the sessions we had earlier this year about how intentional our careers to this point have been, how intentional our lives, our careers were kind of secondary to the conversation. And in terms of, did little Gary sit down on his dad's knee and
Yeah,
say, I want to be a project manager, then a coach, then a podcaster,
yeah.
Nope. And it was with the benefit of hindsight now, it was random, but really shaped very similar to yours, where you gravitated towards opportunity created by people who seemed to just have a more of a vested interest in me than others. So
Yeah,
it became quite people centric then. So I'm really interested in terms of startups and the life of startups. And I don't want to get too far towards the end. My interpretation, I've never been part of a startup. I've met with many people, similar to yourself, who've had some degree of experience or exposure to startups. But my impression, through no genuine research at all, actually, is that there's not one size fits all. There's not such a thing as the startup blueprint model that every startup does this, then that, then gets to there. But you having been involved in multiple startups through a variety of roles in that, what are some things behind the curtains that you wouldn't typically know about startups
sure.
if you've never been involved?
Yeah, and to others who I've met and become friends with, whether it's through our local chamber of commerce or people who are in different fields, I say starting a business and a startup are two different things.
Okay.
So if you and I decide to open up a fish and chips place in Calgary or a furniture store, no one's going to say, do you know if people like fish and chips or will they buy furniture? Like those are silly questions because it's established product market fit. We
Yeah.
know there's going to be a demand. The hard work is going to come from execution, differentiation, consistency, pricing, and those are really hard things to make a business work from scratch.
Mhm.
A startup is really it's an idea that you're taking to see if a business is worth building,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have product market fit. So the difference is, it's hard to start a business that has product market fit. With a startup, you're actually taking an idea to solve a problem, create an opportunity. I'll touch on ExitGuide as an example, but there's loads of other ones, which is, okay, we know there's a need out there for small business owners who are confused as to how to exit their business. Should they sell it? Should they carry on? Should they sell the assets? And so we have a thesis that is, we can help these people do this and navigate this process online, which today it doesn't really exist. There's different ways of approaching it. And so we're striving for product market fit. And I
Yeah.
think that's the big thing of someone, outside looking in is they like to compare the near complete or finished product or the product market fit startup as something that is where you start. And it really is not that. The failure rate is high
Yeah.
and for a variety of reasons, but behind a curtain type stuff is it's a very, very arduous process that has some structure around it. You can avoid some mistakes,
Mhm.
but there is no roadmap to
Right.
it because you're trying to achieve something that hasn't been done before, or you're doing it in such a new and innovative way that it may not work.
Yeah.
And so it has a different set of requirements to kind of get that toehold, start to generate revenue, and actually be able to pay yourself and others that a regular starting a business just does not.
That's fabulous differentiation, and I never looked at it like that. And I don't know that people that I've conversed with have blurred the lines or confused it in any way. I hadn't really thought about that as two completely separate ideas. So then, in terms of failure rate, you mentioned failure rate there being relatively high. If you play it safe and open a business that already has an established marketplace, and then you're looking for that differentiation, better location, ideal products, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like, versus I have an idea. Most people are going to say, I don't know what that is. That sounds crazy. Isn't already someone doing that? Whatever it looks like. So then what would you say are there common causes of the biggest failures within startups in your experience?
There are, in my experience, and as a longtime entrepreneur, I've been a part of more failures than I have successes.
Mhm.
So when you look at the model of venture capital and entrepreneurship in the tech startup space, you survive on your hits. It's like the movie industry. It's you got to have that one big release that makes up for the other, dogs in your portfolio. And but there's a couple of things. I've actually talked about this quite a bit with others. So one is, trying to build a product and not a business. in this day and age, you get no credit for building something. You have to build something that people want or need and are willing to pay for.
Yeah.
And so before, in the early days of all this, if you just built something, that was an accomplishment and created a little bit of a barrier to entry because other people didn't necessarily know how to do these things.
Mm.
Well, you can go to online platforms like Upwork. You can go use no code tools. There's other ways of launching something that goes from idea to whatever it may be, but that's not the trick. The trick is, really going from, an idea to building something that is a business and not just purely as a product. So that's one.
Yeah.
The other is, uh, not really understanding, kind of how to go through that process of identifying that user need and the pain point.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the less sexy, fun stuff that's up front, which is, okay, well, how do you know if you actually are building something that's going to become a business and not just a standalone product? And that means getting out and talking to a lot of your customers and prospective customers and users and really understanding the pain points before you build anything.
Yeah.
The analogy I like to use is, let's just say you decided one day you wanted to build a house for someone and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the logical thing you would do is you wouldn't just start building it and buy a piece of land and start building. You'd say, well, okay, wait a minute. Where's the house going to be located? Who is it for? Is this for an empty nest couple that spends 6 months of the year in the house and the other 6 months on the road? Is this a family of four with two dogs and kids that love sports? Or is it, maybe a single, person who is, working all day? Well, all those have different needs in terms of size, layout, and these other things. So that process of really sitting down and identifying, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do? And then getting feedback on, this idea and this solution is what I'm trying to achieve. So you got to make sure you're building a business and not a product. You got to start out without building anything, but actually talking to people. And the third, which is what I look at, is, falling in love with your solution versus falling in love with the problem.
Right.
And there's different ways you can solve for whatever it is that you're trying to solve for. But if you're so in love with your process, your product, your solution to the market need, you better be right and you better hope you're lucky, because chances are it's going to evolve. And you may get feedback from customers, partners, and other people that says, well, I'd like it to be more of this and less of that, or that's not really the problem. I'm looking at something else. And so, if you're building a widget and you're just convinced it has to be blue, and before you get out and building it, everybody tells you it should be red instead, you got to make sure that you're comfortable with getting that type of feedback, learning, and believing that you're there to meet that market need and solve the demand, but not necessarily in the way that maybe you originally envisioned it. So, love the problem and not your solution to it, because that's going to evolve over time.
That's such sage advice. I remember back in the day when I lived back home, and there was a company that was built, basically a kind of minor works construction company that was built, and we dealt with them through the housing association I was working with at the time as one of our major contractors, and eventually the staff, the kind of senior staff, very small company, maybe a dozen employees, something like that, and eventually the owner, who's the company was named after, was put out to pasture, was kind of shunted to the side to say, you've kind of taken this as far as you can take it.
Yeah.
You're breaking it now. You're getting in the way. We see value in this. We want to protect our own livelihoods going forward. We can take it from here. There was a wee bit of generational gap between them, but not enough to say like we're completely chalk and cheese here. We're not even speaking the same language. So it really makes me think here, just in terms of the skills that you need, Eric. You need to be able to understand, identify the problem, fall in love with the problem, be pragmatic enough to understand, the different types and styles of ways that you could go about solving the problem,
Mhm.
how to get that information, what to use that information for, how to speak to customers, how to modify a product, how to do marketing, how to do sales, how to do a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
That's a lot of skills that not a lot of people, I imagine, have in terms of that. How do you see that, somewhat even within the startup realm, in the very, very early stages of the startup realm? How do you see that growth in people who are maybe just almost solopreneurs at that point, or kind of one man and his cousin sort of thing in their garage?
Well, it's something that comes up a lot, especially with folks who will say, I'm not good at sales, or I don't like speaking in public, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And uh, the answer is you can eventually outsource that, but not in the early stages.
Yeah.
And so I've had this conversation hundreds of times where people say, "Well, I just need to." I'm like, "Look, if if you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't do this."
Mhm.
Like it's just plain and simple. Now, you look at other industries. If you want to be partner at a law firm or a big consulting firm, or make it, at the end of the day, your job is to sell. I
Yeah.
mean, you can be the world's best lawyer, but if you can't get in front of potential clients and bring the business into the law firm, you're not going to make partner.
Yeah.
And so it all comes down to your ability to excite other people about the opportunity in front of you. And that's, selling to get early employees on board. It may be selling to get investors to put money in on an idea and to take a risk. And so, one of the best pieces of advice that I relate to people who are more technical is they'll say, okay, what do I do? I'm not comfortable with this. And you're telling me I have to.
Mhm.
Well, Toastmasters and other long established organizations, been around for decades, are all out there, and they will equip you with some of the basic skill sets. So there are plenty of resources out there. You don't have to become an expert in sales. You don't have to become an expert in product, but you need to know enough to at least move the ball forward, demonstrate some progress. And then investors, what they're looking for at that early stage is, can this person bring that talent in to up level the product, the sales, the marketing, the engineering, whatever it may be? But you're wearing a lot of hats, and that's just part of the thing that you sign on for when you decide to become a founder. And so as you start to build that up, chances are you'll surprise yourself a bit
Mhm.
and be better at it than you think. But there's also a lot of resources that are out there that don't have to cost a lot of money. But the most important thing is you're going through all this, you just have to be comfortable getting outside your comfort zone. And I attribute a lot of my success. I think I said this when you and I first met, is uh, be smart enough to get into the room, and dumb enough to realize I wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, I wanted to get something done, or I wanted to make something happen. And I thought, well, I mean, I can wait for it, or I can defer to someone else. The internet's an amazing tool. YouTube's got a lot of videos. You can learn a ton by asking questions of your coworkers or friends or people in your community, or going onto the internet and, making sure you find something that's credible, and learning from that, and then go put it in practice and give yourself some grace when you make a bunch of stupid mistakes. It's okay. You're still moving ahead.
Yeah. And you're doing something that other people aren't doing. You're actually taking action.
Absolutely. Look, most people don't start. The people who say they're going to start, like, it's just like we're coming up on New Year's relatively soon. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to go to the gym every day. Well, see what the gym looks like come March.
Yeah.
It's full in January, but see how many people. So that consistency and that persistence is really what matters. And eventually you may say, okay, I may not be great at sales, but I'm good enough to get my first few pilot customers on board.
Yeah.
And I'm good enough to have some structure in place that a sales professional can come in and say, okay, look, I can take it from here.
Yeah.
You're doing enough to at least give me some signal that there's some there. Now let me bring my expertise in the door. But you got to start, you got to stick with it, and don't worry about looking like a fool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then someone has their startup, it becomes a success. They are in it, they're enjoying it, they got what they needed from it. And then one day or over a series of days, they wake up and say, I think I'm done. I think I would like to have a, I think I'd like to go do something else now. This is not what I thought it was going to be. The build is more exciting than the sustainment, whatever the rationale is. And that's when organization like ExitGuide could come in. So as the founder of ExitGuide, your mission,
Yeah.
as I mentioned in the bio, is to democratize
Mhm.
the M&A process for small businesses. Can you firstly explain what that means, democratize the M&A
Sure.
process, and then how does that manifest itself into the support that you provide for small businesses?
Yeah, and look, I had the opportunity to work with a whole bunch of venture-backed startups, and some were in difficult situations. And I was brought in. The Venn diagram of willing and able was certainly in effect. to these situations where things were just not on track and you had to kind of figure out the mechanics of the business. So what I will tell you is ExitGuide is for small Main Street business owners. It's not for tech startups because the laws of gravity for tech startups, especially when you get into a place like Silicon Valley and venture back, it's weird. I can explain it. And if you forgive or forget about the rules of gravity and everything, it does make sense in that context.
Yeah.
But what I learned was, through that process, as somebody who was working for these startups, is I always had access to people and resources to help figure things out.
Yeah.
And we're entering an era over the next, we're not even entering, we're in it, right? Which is 85% of businesses in the US and in Canada and North America are owned by people over the age of 50.
Right.
So Gen X and baby boomers own 85. That's a huge portion of our economy that's owned and run by people of a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of stuff that's out there about, okay, go find a boring business to buy, and you get 6 laundromats, you're gonna be living like a millionaire and have it like kind of sort of not really is the truth to that. When you look behind the numbers of this, most, probably about 90% of these businesses are businesses with revenue between $250,000 to maybe $2 million.
Okay.
What does that mean? Well, it means that so much is going to come onto the market or need a transition that the ones that are over 5 million or over over 3 or 4 million in revenue, those are going to gobble up all the experts, the business brokers, the M&A advisors, the attorneys, other people who will help you, because those professionals make money off of hourly rates and success fees.
Yeah.
So why would you sell a $200,000 condo when you can sell a $10 million, home? Well, that's where it goes. So what it means is the Main Street business owner, you own the rug store or an HVAC business or a restaurant or something like that, you're kind of left to your own devices as to figuring this process out. What is my business worth? What steps do I need to take? So what we looked at is we said, okay, how do we tackle the problem of most owners simply don't know where to start and what to do?
Mm-hmm.
The number one myth is not every business owner is out there looking for a buyer. And if you just simply said, hey, Gary, Eric's selling a business, do you want to buy it? And you're like, oh, awesome, I can afford $2 million. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
What happens is most of the people are saying, look, about half of the people that we work with already know who's going to buy that business.
Right.
It's the employee, it's the business partner, it could be a family member. It's less than 10% actually that are going to try to transition to family. Okay. It's someone in their community, but they're frozen with this. Well, I know what I want to go do, but I don't know how to go do it. And I'm not even sure where to start. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and all these factors kick in. So what we're trying to do is make this an approachable online process where they start out with just a simple, intake that says, okay, we'll ask you a bunch of questions, we'll give you a score, and it'll tell you just where are their gaps and how ready you are to put this business on the market.
Yeah.
Or to take it to that known buyer. And then we provide other tools through a dashboard. I can talk more about it. But really, the number one goal is to help that small Main Street business owner who has run a business for years, possibly decades, and get them prepared so they don't fail when they actually do try to take this to market and go through that due diligence process to close. Because it's really, giving them things that they need to know. It's giving them tools to be able to gather the right information and present it appropriately. Mm-hmm. And that's relatively standard, whether you're running something like a restaurant or maybe a light manufacturing company or a service-based business. So we're providing that tools and the platforms to help them identify what is the business worth, what are the steps they need to take, and how to package that up and navigate the process for due diligence.
Yeah. And that's back to one of the things that you said earlier, that you need to be able to be in a position to hire in the help that you need to be able to do what you can do. There are a lot of people out there that are probably saying, I can do this myself. I'm a DIY person and I'll figure this out. Yes, you probably can. However, if you go with someone, I always liken it to when I was creating my incorporation, my company, I could go to the local registry and say, right, listen, I can do this for $93. I just need to fill in these 11
Yeah.
forms and submit the forms, wait for that one to get
Yeah.
approved, and then submit that one
Yeah.
and do that. Or I can go pay someone $275 and they can do it in 24 hours. I
Yeah.
know which one I'm picking, but I also appreciate that other people are that doesn't seem like a hassle to other people as well. So is that reflective of the kind of clientele that you have that say there has to be an easier way to do this, a more appropriate
Yeah.
path?
It is. And look, the odds are against you. So the failure rate for people who try to do the DIY is over 80%.
Mm. Yeah,
And we try not to market, our brand and say, you're probably going to screw this up, so use ExitGuide. But it is kind of the mission. And you know, okay, why do people fail?
yeah,
Well, to sell their business. One is they don't know how to price it. So they pick a number that they think is right. It's not really based on logic. Or they pick a number that says, well, this is what I need to retire. So
yeah.
mispricing your business or not pricing it with any form of methodology is one of the biggest mistakes people can make.
Mhm.
So we give you a valuation report that's, used using your financials. Two is over 50% of the deals fall apart during the due diligence process. And due
Right.
diligence is when, you know, you want to buy my business and you start asking for a bunch of information. Either you know how this process goes, your attorney told you, your friend who's an M&A advisor, whatever it may be. And I don't know what that is. I'm slow to prepare things, information is wrong, financials, things like that. So, it really is helping owners who may say, I can do this on my own, say, okay, you can give it a try. The odds are not in your favor. And it isn't a ton of money for us to help get you educated and get prepared so that you know what you're walking into and level set your expectations.
Mm.
So, I tell people we've got all the tools to do the things that you would need to go do. Really, what we're selling is, confidence and understanding of what you're walking into
Mm.
so that you can actually complete this process. Even if you're selling to an employee and both sides want to buy it, these things fall apart all the time.
Yeah. And would you say also that you're adding in speed to the process, just in terms of the steps to follow, that there's a lot less unknowns, there's a lot less, periods of, relative inactivity and such?
We've all heard the phrase time kills deals,
Mm.
and it is so true when trying to buy or sell a small business. People, lose interest. They run out of steam or confidence that the seller actually knows what he or she is doing.
Yeah.
Uh, just waiting, and then another opportunity that looks better, pops up, and it may or may not be true, but it's a deal they can get done. So, you know, time will absolutely kill your deal if you're not prepared going in. And, it relays into all sorts of other things. So we're not asking you to rush it, but if you kind of have a playbook you can follow, this is like a recipe. We're just giving you a recipe. If you follow it, you'll get a cake. Could you figure it out on your own? Yeah. How many eggs, how much baking soda, how much flour do you use? Like, how do you get the flavor? You'll eventually figure it out. But at the end of the day, like, there are recipes that are out there that you can follow and, come up with a cake the first or second try you do it. So, we're
Yeah.
trying to give you that recipe, that guidance, those instructions, give you an online dashboard. When you're done, you've followed everything, then you just share it with your prospective buyer. And now you're moving through due diligence in a way that has all the information. It's correctly formatted. It's in, you've got answers to questions because you've anticipated those based on following the instructions in the dashboard. So time will kill your deal if you're not careful.
Yeah. And in terms of your client base, not divulging too many business secrets, of course, I imagine the majority would come from people who are in the business and saying, I don't know how to do this, I need some help. Do you also have prospective buyers who say, I don't actually know the process to follow to buy this, but I do have an ongoing concern. I do have,
Mhm.
in terms of, when I say ongoing concern, I do have an ongoing vested interest, is what I mean to say.
Sure.
In that, can you tell me what to look out for? Is it on both sides of
Well, the answer is we want to get there. And I tend to be a pretty open book because if you can figure some of this stuff out, God bless you, go for it. So when you look at just kind of traditional tech startups and you say, okay, a marketplace. So eBay is kind of the classic marketplace. You
yeah,
have to have liquidity in the market. And people are like, well, you just have stuff up there. You're like, well, the hard thing is getting this kind of equilibrium and balance in the marketplace. So you have enough inventory of stuff for sale and you have enough people interested in buying that there's an effect that creates a vibrant marketplace.
Mhm.
And so those are hard to build and can be capital intensive. eBay did not become eBay overnight. Trust me. I mean, the age I am, I knew some of the original employees, and
Yeah.
if you ask them what it was like, it was not this glorious thing that just took off like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
So when we started ExitGuide, one of the things I said is, okay, look, if about half of the people coming in the door already know who they're going to sell to, and most of them say that their biggest issue is not finding a buyer, but with the process, let's start with preparing sellers so that they can increase the odds of success.
Yeah.
What that's led to is inbound interest from people saying, wait a minute, can I look at the inventory? Because what a buyer likes is they like to say, well, wait a minute, you're telling me you have X number of businesses in your system, and maybe half of them want to take their business to market, but exit guides help them get prepared. So I, as the buyer, am looking at this thing saying, well, good. Now they don't have these ridiculous expectations that a business with $700,000 in revenue thinks it's worth $20 million.
Yeah.
And when I ask them for basic stuff is the due diligence process, they've done all that work. So we'll get there. The tech entrepreneur part of me is, why haven't we done that? Two-sided marketplaces are generally really capital intensive to build out.
Mhm.
They are difficult in terms of trying to create a product experience for both sides. So we've said not now, but that certainly doesn't mean not ever.
Yeah.
We absolutely do want to go do that. And if somebody listening to this is super excited and wants to come find me and give me a check for $20 million, we'll build that in a rocket ship. So
Yeah.
we can do all of those things, but there is a reason behind not doing that just yet, even though we'd love to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, because I could definitely see a market for both.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I was perspective or
yeah.
prospecting, even just to say, help me with some preliminary
Yes, and
understanding.
I end up getting calls from people in my network where they're like, "Hey, look, I want to leave my job and thinking about buying a small business," and so um, I do those calls on occasion and
Yeah.
kind of try to give a both encouragement but a dose of reality,
Yeah.
that there aren't a whole bunch of 70-year-old guys sitting around by the phone waiting for you to call and say, "I'd love to digitize your business and you
Yeah.
know double the revenue. Are you willing to sell it to me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, just take it for a song." But those days are over.
Yeah. And in terms of the types and styles of personalities, because you could be dealing with someone who has literally taken this from a whim of an idea that came to them on a sunny walk on a beautiful afternoon, with their love, like that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and then taking it through to the point where they're kind of saying, I know it's the right thing to let go, but I don't know if I can. Like, have you had any, if I could say, volatile experiences where the person has the cold feet at the last minute, or there's some sort of other volatility that's introduced during the process?
There is so much emotion in this. I mean, you're hitting on one of the key things. Uh, a lot of people who start small businesses, again, take the tech entrepreneur out of this. A lot of people who start small businesses are good at something. They're a good plumber, or they love to bake, or they like helping people, with their homes. I mean, you know, and so it may not be necessarily be the passion. I don't know who likes to clean out toilets, but like you're like, look, but I love the result of satisfying the customer need.
Yeah.
And the business, in building that business and the marketing and HR and getting taxes, those are a byproduct. And for some owners, they they don't enjoy that part of it. And so as the business grows, they get further removed from doing the thing that they were passionate about.
Yeah.
And for them, you know, it's emotional, it's hard. But there's others who they've put so much into this, and blood, sweat, tears. Maybe they've put out a second mortgage on their home. I mean, the emotional aspect of this is, you got to remember, everybody works hard,
Mm.
but when you've kind of risked, your own personal finances, opportunity cost of not having a job, working over holidays and other things, that creates an emotional attachment. This is like a pet,
Yeah.
or a family member. And so, that's why when we were really kind of looking at how do we engage customers is I don't know that we've ever had somebody who's come to our site and said, yeah, I don't need help.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is I know I need help. I'm not sure what that looks like. And
Yeah.
then the second, or in conjunction with that, is how do I know I can trust you?
Mhm.
Because this is different. I'm not selling, a lawnmower that I don't use anymore.
Yeah.
This is an entirely different thing. So we have the tools that can solve, most of the problems that they're going to face or the challenges. But what we're selling really is that comfort, confidence, and everything, which says we understand where you are
Yes.
and we want to help you along this journey and we want to be that trusted resource for you. And I can't guarantee that your business is going to sell,
Yeah.
but at least we want to increase your odds dramatically that you'll be able to get through the process and either get a deal done or know that you gave it your best shot.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
that,
hard. It's emotional.
yeah, for sure. And it really lends itself to, you know, you've obviously had such an eclectic career in terms of your experience and exposure to entrepreneurialistic behaviors and practices and such. And then to say, one, I identify a business need. There is a transactional nature to this. However, what you get is a true understanding of who you are, what you're
Mhm.
going through, and the checks and balances to make sure you're still okay. I'm not preempting the process. I don't know the process, but there's a human element there. So what it makes me think about is how have you structured your team to make sure that you have people on your team who have that level of understanding and empathy and human relation there
Mhm.
to make sure that you can trust people. So that talks about a different type and style and skill set combined.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And when I talk about ExitGuide, as a business, I say, look, there's a head and a heart reason that I wanted to do this.
Mhm.
The head reason was 35 to 40% of the GDP in North America is from small Main Street businesses. 85% are run by people over the age of 50, blah, 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 blah. So you can look and be like, big market, massive need, technology can solve this, all these other things. The heart reason, which is what I look for when I get people engaged deeply into the business, is, you know, if you work in a tech company in Silicon Valley, and I did this for 20 some odd years,
Yeah.
you can go raise 10, 20, 50, $100 million and quite frankly come close to just pissing it away on incompetency or a solution looking for a problem. There's all sorts of reasons why these things don't work out.
Yeah.
And there's forgiveness there. Now, maybe there should be, maybe there shouldn't be. I'm not going to be the judge of that. But, when I was doing this, if I walked into a company that was distressed, the investors might say, well, look, we're already in for 20 million bucks. So putting in another $1 or $2 million to give this guy a little bit of time to figure things out makes sense.
Yeah.
And I also lived in Menlo Park, California, which is where Sand Hill Road and Facebook and Stanford and everything, like it's all within, a very tight knit circle. So if I didn't understand something or I needed something, buddy from church, neighbor, kids, mom, friends, mom, like I had access to this like world-class talent that, hey, let's get a cup of coffee and
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And that's crazy. And I feel very, very fortunate to have done that. But if you run a business in Kansas City, Missouri, or Calgary that, is a service-based business, you don't just fall out of bed and find those types of resources, but
Yes.
you've run a real business. And so the heart reason for this is I feel like the small business owner who's been the backbone of our economies is kind of getting screwed on this huge transaction because the economics of a service provider, lawyer, business broker, whatever it may, don't make sense. And I totally understand why it doesn't make sense for them. But the heart reason that I look for is, okay, do you have a passion for helping these people? Like, do you feel like they're in some ways getting screwed not because of something illegal, but that they're just not having access to it. So can we democratize this? Can we use their Silicon Valley, contacts, resources, experience to build technology so that the guy who runs the pizza place in New Jersey can actually figure out how to go sell his business?
Yeah.
And this is different than ad tech or other things. Like you kind of have to feel like this is something that I believe we're addressing a bit of an injustice.
Right.
And I don't mean to get too, touchy feely in this, but I feel like, okay, we can use technology to make this stuff accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it. We just need to kind of figure out a couple of other steps. But if we can do that, we're going to help a lot of people. And so when I'm hiring, I look for a number of things, but being a good person who has that level of empathy and can relate to that small business owner does show up in customer support. It shows up in product. It shows up in marketing. You have to understand their pain points and be in it with them so that they do build that trust and give you the keys essentially to say, okay, I want to partner with you on this most important asset that is something I've built over years and years.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not easy to do, to find those types of styles of people, I'm sure as well,
No, I think, I mean, like I have sayings that tumble out of my mouth all the time. I'm a ADHD adult, married to an ADHD woman who we have two ADHD kids. But what I say is, like I raised two kids. I don't want to hire any, and so this is a business. Our customers are not influencers. They're not on TikTok. Like our customers have mortgages, they have kids, they have responsibilities. And so I think it does take a level of life experience to really understand that this is an issue and relate to these people as not just users, as we like to call it in the tech industry, but as real people with real businesses, with real revenue who have worked very hard at building something that they probably didn't get a lot of glitz and glamour, and they weren't in TechCrunch and they didn't get on, podcasts and other things. But to say like, yeah, we're going to help you through this transaction because you've built something. And so it tends to skew a little bit older.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this is the Best You interview series, as I always mention. And one thing I like to try and do is give the interviewee an opportunity to leave us with a bit of word of wisdom in terms of what you do as a regular practice that enables you to be a better version of yourself day upon day, week upon week. What sort of practices do you have in your life?
I think the number one thing that I look for when I hire people, because I think I've discovered this on about myself, which is curiosity.
Hmm.
I love curious people.
Yeah.
You can graduate from the best universities and be good at school, but that does not mean you're going to be good at business
Yeah.
or medicine, whatever it is you're going to be. And the inverse is true. And I look at my own career, coming out of school with a journalism major, um, wasn't exactly graduating with honors. I mean, I did okay, but how did I get to do the things that I did? How did I get to sit in rooms and pitch companies and work on operating plans? And it really did come from a level of curiosity.
Yeah.
And some of that is a desire to learn, but I think it's just more of I find wonderment in so many things that are around me.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were at a cocktail party and I met somebody and she said, "Oh, I run a business. We sell the yellow paint that goes on roads,"
Right.
other people are like, "Wow, that's okay." I could pin her down for an hour and a half. I would have all these questions about like
Yeah.
how does this go? And so I think some of that is natural, some of that has been built up because I found so much joy of exploring things. So for me, just constantly wanting to learn and understand, ask questions. Don't consider myself as like, the expert in anything.
Yeah.
If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
And so like I have so many times really checked myself and thought to myself, man, I am absolutely the idiot in this room, and thought that is so crazy awesome
Yeah.
because hopefully I can ask all these smart people with all this great experience, a ton of questions. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. It's okay to look a little bit silly. People don't know as much as you think they know. And most people, if you ask them about what they do and how they do it, people like to talk about themselves and what they do.
Definitely.
And so you'd be surprised at how many people are willing to teach you.
Yeah.
They're all around you. They really are.
Yeah.
And YouTube and other things are great tools, but step into something. And as I've told my kids, we're now 23 and 25. If you can remember how to say, I don't know, but, and follow but with something else, you will go reasonably far in life. I don't know, but I can find out. I don't know, but I'm willing to learn if you will teach me. I don't know, but I can get back to you if I can go check my notes. Most people are very comfortable with somebody who is willing to take that stuff. So be curious, ask questions. Don't worry about looking like a fool.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I've often said the most interesting person in the room is the most interested because of all the reasons that you just said there, in terms of, the ability to have people talk about themselves, to have them just, talk about things that they typically don't get to talk about in their own network, because either
Yeah,
they've all heard it or there's just not a level of interest there or whatever the other reason is. This has been a fantastic enlightenment in terms of, just a little bit of insight into entrepreneurism, but almost a life cycle of care and feeding for graceful exits and appropriate exits and such. Before I let you go, where can people find out a little bit more about you, Eric?
sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on social media, so you can do one of two things. You can go to exitguide.com and you can email me, Eric with a C, ERIC, at exitguide.com. Uh, that is much easier to remember than ericgrafstrom.com. But for anyone who has Scandinavian heritage, it's Grafstrom, just like it sounds.
Yeah.
Ericgrafstrom.com. So we've got Exit Guide. I also do, entrepreneur and startup coaching for, first-time entrepreneurs and helping. And those tend to look more like just, weekly calls and things like that. But I really enjoy that ability to give back to other people. So many people help me along the way to get to, have all these interesting, and you said eclectic. I'm going to tell my wife that she's endured 30 years of my eclectic career journey. I've got friends who are retiring from like consulting firms and like, why is he retiring? I'm like, baby, you should have, you chose short, funny, and curious. Uh, but so ericgrafstrom.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. But love to hear from people. Mention the show. Gary's freaking awesome. You should be listening to all of his podcasts, and he's just a joy to be around and learn from. So really enjoyed the time and the opportunity to speak with you today.
Me too. Thanks again, my friend.
You take care.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.